I think technology is going to drive the industry out of this mess. I just think a lot of the companies, especially the more older SME companies, are just a bit slower, but it can get you out of a lot of holes.
It's a short intro today. As I welcome back Andrew Curtin, CEO of Construction Wave. Construction Wave provides news and insights into the UK construction industry. If you haven't already, sign up for their daily email newsletter that covers infrastructure, commercial, residential, regulations, and strategic news. Alongside this, Construction Wave have recently announced their first Construction CFO Summit, 19th of Feb 2024 in London. There'll be a full day of speakers and insights into the world of construction financials. Registration for the event is open right now. The links to this and the Construction Wave newsletter are in the show notes. Andrew, welcome back. What's going on?
Thanks for having me back, Peter. It's been a couple of months since I spoke. Hopefully I'm going to be a recurring guest because I'm enjoying the show so far. But yeah, busy few months from our side, Peter. You know yourself, it's a tough market out there, so we all need to work a bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're the first two-timer on Construction Disrupted, so there's an accolade for the CV.
Yes. No, well done, Peter. You're doing a lot of good work for the industry, and you're pushing content, and this podcast alone is making an impact. I know for myself, I enjoy listening, and you have some good guests as well.
Cool, fantastic. Right back at you in terms of what you're doing at Construction Wave. With that in mind, I'm going to dive straight into it because this is kind of a recap in the news and what's been going on in 23 and maybe a bit of a look into 24 and the impact that this year is going to have on next year. But I think one of the biggest topics that the industry cannot avoid in any way, shape or form, and we mentioned it last time we spoke actually, but surprise, surprise, a lot has happened in those few months since we last spoke. But HS2, what is going on there?
Yeah, it was a difficult decision to take. I suppose it's 5 or 6 weeks ago now since it was announced. The reality is, Peter, it has, destroyed a lot of order books for, small, big, medium-sized companies. There's really personal issues, family relocations who've depended on this work for the next number of years. So it's more about the commercial side. If there's a lot of, look, it hasn't affected me, and sometimes when it doesn't affect people just forget about it. But the reality is, families had to relocate. People's jobs aren't as secure, and it just sends shockwaves through the industry. Everyone thinks government money is infinite, but now we know it's not.
Yeah. Do you think that, because we've seen, as we know, the construction industry has many challenges, and in recent years, I keep saying the same thing, but you've got skill shortages, you've got price increase, you've got Brexit, you've got COVID, all these kind of things that have had repercussions for years to come. Do you think this will be similar in that we'll still be feeling the reverberations about what is happening in HS2 next year and for the foreseeable?
Oh, completely. There's a massive hole to fill. And yeah, it's okay now that you're cracking on with some projects, but I'm just saying the reality is these companies have forecasts, and they're planning years and years in advance, and they have £100 billion or whatever it is. I don't know the northern part, how much it was worth. Just say it was half of it. And you have 3 or 4 major companies who are affecting the whole supply chain now have to rejig that. They say they're planning, probably the name better than me, the North. They're going to kind of divvy up the projects across the North. What was the name they put on it?
Oh, okay. I can't remember.
Yeah, for the listeners anyway, it was just about revamping northern, the northern stations and making them more interlinked. Could be hot air for the moment. Who knows? I don't really know. There seems to be no great plans. I think there was only a website put up a few days after the announcement or whatever it was. It's just hard to guarantee that for the other losses. So yeah, it has been a complete disaster for the construction industry. It's sent shockwaves through the industry. It has affected the markets. It is affecting banking confidence and bond markets. So everything through that announcement has been affected. Confidence in the industry is much lower at the end of this year than it was the start of this year. And it was already low at the start of this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want this all to be negative, but there's one other thing that I want to cover that has been, I don't know. I mean, you tell me, but it seems to be a lot more prevalent in the news at least, and that's so many companies going into admin and no longer trading, which has again had a massive impact on construction. Do you think that's going to continue into 24? I mean, it's had the same kind of outcomes as HS2 will in terms of the relocation of people and jobs and roles and projects. But do you think that's going to continue into next year then, this kind of admin cycle?
Unfortunately, I do. I think it's just going to continue. These pre-COVID contracts, there's still a bit of time left in them, and that's the real killer on top of material prices and the war in Ukraine and now war in Israel and just all these different factors, affect everything. The administrations are going to keep coming for 2024, I think. I probably see in the tail end of 2024. Naturally, it's going to slow off because there's less companies in the market. And I'm sorry, it's not the best news, but there's so many things have been thrown at the construction industry in the last few years. So you're going to see a fall. And I speak to banks about this, and I speak to some family offices and stuff like that. It's just it just affects everything in the market at the moment, and it's just going to keep falling for another while yet. I do see like end of Q3, end of Q4 next year. I do hear some of these institutions, like I just mentioned, being a bit more confident in the construction market. They can see a bit more progress at the tail end of next year. I guess my biggest worry then is actually the labour side of it. Because you've such a scarce amount of labour. You have people getting paid on people getting way overpaid for some positions at the moment. It's an extremely expensive market at the moment. So that's my biggest fear, is the labour side of it. And maybe what you do as well is just that attraction and brand of the industry is it's just not there really. So to answer your question, Peter, a tough 6 to 7 months next year. We're going to see more administrations, and then we'll see it plateau.
So let's flip that on its head then. One company that's
I feel very negative now, and I'm quite an optimistic guy, and I just feel. But the reality is, even from our side of Construction Wave, we like to be positive, but unfortunately, it's some of the negative stories are massive, and they have to be covered because they affect people's jobs. They affect supply chain. So I hate being negative because I'm not negative by nature, but it's just tough at the moment.
Absolutely, and that's just part of the market. We have a lot of challenges, and it's about finding those solutions to different challenges. And you've got like you say, you're reporting on something that is real, so you can't make up these stories. And unfortunately, the downside or the challenges or the negative stories seem to get more press, as is the press, than positive stories. But I know you do a really good job of trying to balance that out with positive and negative news within the construction industry, which is great. And one of the things that I keep seeing, it seems to be almost on a daily basis, is RSK. The group of nearly, or they are a group of more than 200 companies now, with about 14,000 people employed. What is going on there? Are they just going to buy up the whole industry?
I think Rory Butler, who is now going to be our editor in January. So congrats to Rory, who's going to be building out the team at Construction Wave. He's going to be building the editorial team. Rory has followed this religiously week by week, so he's probably more qualified than me to tell you the ins and outs of it. But it does seem like the CEO, who seems to be quite a reserved, media shy person, which is kind of it's kind of cool in its own right. They have that Berkshire Hathaway strategy of the construction sector. I think he might even said that in like a press release or something. That, but they're building this for listeners. If anyone doesn't know Berkshire Hathaway, it's owned by Warren Buffett. They buy up companies. They leave them cash flow. They don't get stuck in. They just leave them operate, and they're the holding company essentially. So RSK have a similar strategy, except in constructions, FM, other different services that are adjacent to the construction market. So, I think they have. You might know better than me, Peter. I can't even keep up myself, and we're the one publishing it. 20, 30 companies. I think it's 30 companies or something they might have acquired this year.
I think it was 20 plus last time I looked, but probably, I mean, they've got the whole of December, right? So it's probably going to be 30 by the end of the year.
Yeah, maybe. I think the industry does need some sort of consolidation. That's for sure. It's a very fragmented industry. I'm not saying buying up all the companies is the right strategy. It's not a bad one for sure, especially if you own it. But it does need some sort of consolidation. I'm really enjoying Rory's tracker. He's tracked this story or this concept for the full year. So I'm interested to see where it goes. Hopefully we can get the CEO to sit down with us and do some sort of a virtual Q&A session about it, because I think that would attract a good audience.
Yeah,
a big one too.
Absolutely. I know he's a keen listener, so I think he's got a bit too much on his plate to bother about this. But anyway, who knows? If you're listening, you're more than welcome. Okay, so on this podcast, I like to look at new tech and the digital side of construction and what's coming through and innovative new products. Throughout 23, have you, in your reporting and research and analysis, have you seen a step change in technology coming through in the industry, or is it pretty much the same pace as it's always been?
Depends who you're talking to. It depends who you're talking to. I would say naturally technology is becoming more adopted through the industry. That's for sure. I'm not sure the pace of it is rapid. I think it's gradually, slow linear growth. I think it's still quite a tough sell. And most of these contractors, they don't want to buy it just because they don't want to learn how to do it. That's the simple reality. It is, it's faster to use spreadsheets or WhatsApp, and they don't want to bother or have the internal resource to deal with some of these companies. I do think it is growing. Where is a very interesting space is the fit-out market. Fit-out companies are adopting technology much faster than your infrastructure and large tier one contractors. Those fit-out companies, 50 to 100 million, in London and Manchester and Liverpool and these type cities, they're adopting technology much faster because they have tighter deadlines, fast turnarounds, less people usually. So I'm interested in that market. If I had the money, Peter, I would set up a fit-out wave, because I think it's a very interesting market to look at, and they're adopting a lot of technology. So I think that space alone. But rail and infrastructure and stuff, I think it's a good bit slower.
Yeah, interesting. I'd never seen it from that perspective. So that's something I'll be looking into and checking out a bit more throughout the next year. Keeping an eye on that one. One other thing that has been quite prevalent, and I've seen it as a positive in terms of it being put in the spotlight this year more than anything, are the payment practices in the industry. So I've been involved in research, and I've seen research, and I've done my own research and analysis on payment practices within the industry, including fit out and fixtures and fittings. Actually, have you seen a change in payment practices throughout this year, or have we still got a little bit of a way to go in terms of leveling the playing field and making sure that payments are on time?
I know there's some government legislation brought in to help this, but the answer is no. You saw that with Vistry, asking all their supply chain for a 10% discount on all invoices, which I understand. Sometimes you do have to ask that, but the way you communicate it is the real key. No, payment practices are still in the ages. Regulation is beginning to creep in, but just when the economy's bad, everything's gone against the construction industry. I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it, Peter. I would love to have tighter regulations on it, but you're kind of in a hamster wheel now because you have contracts that are years old, and trying to implement that into a new contract, it's an absolute nightmare. But hopefully bit by bit you'll see it. I can't honestly say I've heard of fantastic payment practices being progressed this year.
Yeah, so I suppose it's slow and steady wins the race in that one, as seems most of the potential challenges in construction.
Yeah, I think it will become more and more regulated. I just don't think it's this year. Definitely not a month out till Christmas, anyway.
Yeah, for sure. You always see it on LinkedIn, don't you? Around about this time of year, that the one thing you can do as a gift or a present is pay all your contractors and freelancers on time before Christmas. It's usually rife on LinkedIn, and that's not just in construction, that's just across the board. And I say that as a bit of a freelancer myself. Okay, let's wrap things up then and look towards the future and 2024. What's the deal with next year? I know we've touched on it a little bit, but is it more of the same? Are we going to see more admin, slow or reduced house building? And let's finish on a positive. What positives are we going to have during next year?
The house building is a tough one. Yeah, your Taylor Wimpey's and these companies have been feeling the effects this year. I see the latter half of the second half of next year seeing more improvements on the house building side. You have interest rates beginning to come down, so that's going to open things a bit more. So I think next year will definitely. I think it'll be better than this year. It's been a very tough year. This year it's been a tough year in 2022 also. But I do think next year will have more to offer than this year. I don't know yet what it will be, but just from talking to some people in the industry, just some executives and people like in financial services, they kind of write off the first quarter definitely, but the tail end of next year I just see more government initiatives, and look, it's highly dependent. It's an election year as well, probably next year, Peter, so it's dependent on macroeconomic circumstances as well, but it's going to settle down. It can't keep raining at this pace, so I think I'm a big proponent of technology and some of the stuff that's out there. I think we need to be a bit more productive on what we're using. There's some amazing tools that companies are just not using. They're just thrown to the side, and I think technology is going to drive the industry out of this mess. I just don't. I just think a lot of the companies, especially the more older SME companies, are just a bit slower, but it can get you out of a lot of holes, and I think it can really help get the industry through this type of mess. But the labour side of it as well, I go back to the labour side, that's just my only thing I'd love to be positive about, is like, how do we get that influx of people, the tail end of next year, for we have a more positive outlook. How do we get the right people in the right places? Because I don't know where companies are getting people at the moment. It just seems like they're pulling, how they're pulling them out of the sky, I don't really know. So I think that's my biggest worry. But yeah, you're going to see a better year next year all around. It's not going to be record breaking, that's for sure. We're starting from minus 100. We can't go to full speed or just overnight.
Again, slow.
I wish I had more positive things to say. I wish I had more positive things to say, Peter, but I would say it will be incrementally positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, 0 to 100 is almost impossible within the industry, like you said, because of legacy contracts and the length of large scale projects and everything in between that can happen. But as always, I appreciate your openness and honesty. I'm sure you'll be on again in 24 with a lot more positive news. For anyone out there, like I said in my intro, sign up to the newsletter from Construction Wave. Check out the website. The links are in the show notes, because it is a hotbed. Never thought I'd say that on a podcast, but a hotbed of news and
it's
information.
An interesting analogy.
Yeah, news, information, and case studies. Yeah. Hotbed. I've said it 3 times on the podcast now. Fantastic. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
No worries, Peter. Thanks for having me.